The NATO intervention in Libya that was seen as a success from the point of view of those who wanted to see the end of Gaddafi's administration was quickly followed by fighting between different factions of the regime change militias that continues to this day and has fed in heavily to other conflicts south of Libya. The same is true for Mali. These operations may, after an intense flaring of violent incidents, reduce the overall violence temporarily, only for it to flare up again, often more intensely than when Western forces intervened in the first place. The same pattern has been going on since the French intervened in Chad in the late 60s. Back then, the violent battles that lasted from 1969 to 72 ended in the defeat of the National Liberation Front of Chad, but the unrest continued. The president was killed by Gaddafi-backed rebels in 75. The French intervened again 3 years later, which led to 30 years of civil wars and political violence. Operation Serval follows a similar trajectory. A quick and intensely violent intervention led to a brief period of pushback against the rebels in 2013 and a significant reduction in violence in most regions of Mali at the time. But in fact, what was happening was the violence was changing its shape. Instead of intense battles with French forces, there was more hit-and-run guerrilla-type fighting that persisted throughout the intervention at low levels. This operation was seen as a success, with levels of violence reduced to lower than pre-intervention. But again, the violence returns worse than before. Under Operation Barkhane, violence in Mali and Burkina Faso has exploded since early 17, past the levels seen prior to the Serval intervention, and shows no signs of easing at present. As the OECD, in their report in February just gone, they point out that in all these cases, before and after the interventions, no steps were taken to alter the dynamics of inequality and the unequal distribution of resources and power in these countries. All of these countries are suffering from the legacy of colonialism, from the exploitation of their natural resources by foreign mining corporations and fossil fuel companies, from punishing tariff regimes and the fallout from having to compete on the global agricultural goods markets against deeply subsidised cheap goods from the northern countries, and from the fact that transfer mispricing and tax secrecy jurisdictions funnel trillions of dollars each year out of the global south economies and state coffers, and from the exploitive and crushing repayment conditions on loans, sometimes taken out by dictators that use the money for their own gain rather than for public good. So when a group of jihadists are able to set up in a remote region of Mali and literally provide public services to that community, set up schools and military training facilities and protect that village or town, this is a problem for the central government and its ability to effectively provide governance structures, usually due to lack of financial resources because of the reasons I laid out above. And on top of this, climate change is ravaging these countries. Many of the fighters that join up with the jihadists are just farmers that see climate change reducing their prospects of making a living in these poorly resourced places disappear before their eyes. If you want stability in this area, the first and most important thing to do is look at debt cancellation and corruption being perpetrated by European companies operating in the region, tax evasion, transfer mispricing or otherwise, because without the funds to provide state services and infrastructure, in some areas the jihadists are likely to win at least as many friends as the central government. There's plenty of areas that central governments in these countries are not able to control because they don't have the resources to do it, and the jihadists are able to retreat into these areas at will, much like the Taliban did using Pakistan for cover in Afghanistan. Javier, you said that we are sending our soldiers to their deaths without sufficient arms. You're actually right, it's a fair point, but I would suggest that we don't send them at all and we'll let them all live.